Could you please give us a little background on your professional training and your position in the American College of Pediatricians?
Yes, certainly. I received my medical degree from the University of Connecticut and completed my internship and residency in pediatrics at the Connecticut Children's Medical Center, and did some additional training in adolescence at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia, and had the privilege to practice general pediatrics for 15 years before going on full-time with the American College of Pediatricians in advocacy for children. I am entering my second term as president with that organization.
Dr. Michelle Cretella. Hers is a name that appears very often in my line of work. Whenever there's an opportunity to attack trans people, label being transgender a mental illness and affirmative care child abuse, Cretella is almost always there, spreading her own particular brand of anti-trans hate. She's often forwarded as a top pediatrician by far-right pundits, even though she has never published research in a peer-reviewed journal on the subject of transgender people, or indeed any subject to my knowledge. It should also be noted that she isn't even licensed to practice medicine. And yet time and time again we find her being given a platform to spread anti-scientific bigotry. Now why do I say anti-scientific? Well, not only has Michelle Cretella completely failed to defend her position on a peer-review level, but she is also the president of the American College of Pediatricians. Now when I say American College of Pediatricians, what you'll likely think of is the scientific institution, the American Academy of Pediatrics, an established and reputable organization that works within the scientific consensus to ensure child practice is as effective and ethical as possible. This is not the case with the American College of Pediatricians. The American College of Pediatricians is a parasitic hate group founded by Christian fundamentalists in 2002 who rejected the scientific consensus because it does not agree with their religious ideology. Its members refuse to engage with actual scientific method, instead targeting the general public who don't know the politics behind the organization. That's why their chosen name is so close to the legitimate American Academy of Pediatrics. They're attempting to steal credibility of an established and trusted institution. The Anti-Science College of Pediatricians is estimated by independent sources to have a membership of no more than 200 people, compared to the American Academy of Pediatrics and its 64,000 members. To really drive home the point, the AAP has twice as many staff running the institution than the ACP has total members. Now this interview comes from TFPStudentAction, a Catholic group of adults who hide behind young impressionable teenage boys in order to avoid criticism. I actually responded to them back in 2017, refuting their 10 ways to debunk transgender ideology and protect the family. Fight back video. Likewise in 2016, I responded to their 10 reasons why you should oppose same-sex marriage video. And I had intended to respond to this video when it came out, but I never got round to it. So since then the full video has actually been removed from YouTube, but a short clip remains, and indeed the whole video can be found on their website, uploaded via Vimeo, transcript and all. So it's still out there, pumping out misinformation. Therefore I felt it was finally time to tackle said video piece by piece. This is Veiled Pediatrician Michelle Cretella attacks trans children.
You've stated that the transgender ideology is responsible for large-scale child abuse. Could you please explain why you call it child abuse?
Essentially, transgender ideology holds that people can be born into the wrong body. It's simply not true. We can demonstrate this by looking at twin studies. No one is born in the wrong body.
Agreed. The born in the wrong body expression is a rather old attempt to try and convey what being transgender is like to cisgender people. Cis or cisgender being the scientific term for someone who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth. It is by no means an accurate nor nuanced description of the experiences many trans people have. Talk to various trans people out there, including myself, and you'll discover that we don't typically use the phrase born in the wrong body. I'm not saying that born in the wrong body is never used by trans people, but more often than not it's used by cis writers, to the extent that people think is a prevalent view within the trans community. Even in the children's book, Red, A Crayon Story, the crayon always had a blue body. It just had the wrong label assigned to it. As for the claim that we can demonstrate the experiences of trans people as not being legitimate by, quote, looking at twin studies, end quote, why then have you never published research doing just that? That's quite a claim you're making, one which, if it could stand scientific vigor, would shift the paradigm and mark your name in history. Yet you haven't done that. Instead, Cretella only does interviews with religious organizations and news personalities, trying to pass off unverified opinion as fact. I can see she's trying to do this with her usage of transgender ideology, when there is no such thing. There's the scientific consensus on what helps trans people live a decent and fulfilling life that she's chosen to ignore. Outside of that, it's a conversation. Everyone, including groups of trans people, disagree as to what gender actually is, and thus, by proxy, what being trans or even cisgender entails. We don't have all the answers when it comes to such a complicated subject. What we do know is that any attempts to deny a person's gender exploration or to change their gender identity are demonstrably harmful. That is the scientific consensus, something that is only an ideology insofar as it's what the evidence clearly demonstrates and the overwhelming majority of medical experts accept on that basis. This is a fact agreed upon by the UK Council for Psychotherapy, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and the US Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to name a few. The only ideology at play here is that of Cretella and the parasitic hate organization, the American College of Pediatricians.
So to take that lie and essentially indoctrinate all of our children from preschool forward with that lie, we are destroying their ability for reality testing. Okay, so this is cognitive and psychological abuse. I want to say just a little more about that. And the reason it's destroys the reality testing is because although children age 3, preschool age, most can correctly identify as I am a boy or I am a girl, most children will not understand that a boy grows into a man and stays a man, or that a girl grows into a woman and stays a woman. If they see a man get into a dress and put on makeup, many 7-year-olds may believe he just became a woman. And the other side is not being honest. They're not acknowledging that.
The only one being dishonest here is Cretella, starting with the idea that children are being indoctrinated into a so-called transgender ideology. What Cretella is actually talking about is children being taught enough to try and help them respect their fellow classmates who are exploring their gender identity. So preventing bullying. Cretella is so absorbed by her religious ideology, something that actually exists, that she perceives anti-bullying measures to be indoctrination. She is arguing that children should be left to target their trans peers, doing untold, long-lasting psychological harm to said children in the process. And yet she has the gall to pretend like teaching respect and acceptance is abusive. But that's just one of the many great hypocrisies Cretella shows. Going back to her claim that teaching children not to bully trans children destroys their ability for reality testing. How? Can she demonstrate that? Because currently it's an assertion without any and all basis. Also, putting on a dress and wearing makeup is not what makes a person a woman. And perhaps children had a harder time grasping this back when only women were allowed to wear dresses, and only dresses. I think Cretella's age really shows here. Women aren't forced to wear dresses these days. Many have short hair, yet we don't have children walking about confused. Why? Well, because they've not been told by society all their life that women wear dresses. But it is possible that some may still be confused. And that's fine. That's why we have education, to help children understand things which confuse them. So, with that noted, I feel obliged to fire back on Cretella's clear hypocrisy. On one hand, she wants to claim that a nuanced understanding of sex and gender, based on the evidence available, destroys a child's ability for reality testing. Yet on the other, she wants society to abide by moral values taken from her religious beliefs. Beliefs which include talking snakes, a solid dome for the sky, and the ability to turn bread and wine into the literal flesh and blood of Christ. Things which, unlike the existence of trans people, have exactly zero scientific basis. Cretella can't decry the scientific consensus on trans people as destroying a child's ability for reality testing, whilst heading a hate group that seeks to instill a Christian theocracy based on their unevidenced mythology.
And this happened most recently in Rocklin, California. It was the end of the kindergarten school year, and the kindergarten teacher called the whole class together. This was at the behest of the boys' parents, and had the whole class sit down, and she read them two gender, I will call them gender-bending stories. One was the red crayon, in which you have a crayon that's actually blue wrapped in red paper. So that primes the kids to think, oh, what's on the outside doesn't have to match the inside. The next story the teacher read was I Am Jazz, which is about a boy whose parents helped him impersonate a girl from the age of 3. He now has his own television program. He's 17, but looks like a girl from the waist up. And following those two stories, I'll call him Joey, left the classroom, presumably to use the bathroom, and then came back into the classroom in a dress. And the teacher said, boys and girls, Joey is actually a girl just like Jazz. From now on, we need to call her Josephine. Again, I'm making the names up. But this was very confusing to the other children in kindergarten. And it terrified one girl in particular. She was home with her mother, had just bathed, got out of the tub, mom wraps her up, little girl goes by the mirror, her hair was slicked back. She burst into tears. Mommy, am I turning into a boy? I don't want to turn into a boy. Joey turned into a girl. Am I going to turn into a boy? Now, I know this because the mother called me. Again, as the president of the College of Pediatricians, I've been outspoken, so parents reach out to me. And this mother is being told that she is the one who's crazy. Her daughter is the one who is having a problematic reaction. This is insane.
No, this is opportunistic. Now, I don't know the truth to the mother's claims. I know she's appeared on numerous news and various Christian channels, so she's gained some form of attention from all this. How much is her exaggerating what happened and how much is the truth is something we don't know. Generally, in my personal experience, having seen this sort of thing time and time again, there's very little truth to these sorts of claims. However, let's just take everything Cretella has just stated to be true. What's the situation we're in? Well, a trans child couldn't live in the closet any longer. Now, refusing to support a child exploring their gender identity has been shown to be harmful, resulting in increased anxiety and depression, the end result of which is the fact that half the young trans people have attempted suicide in the past year. Meanwhile, trans children supported in being allowed to socially transition at home and at school have levels of anxiety and depression equal to a cisgender control. That is, they show no signs of increased anxiety and depression compared to the general population if allowed to socially transition. So allowing the child to socially transition is necessary for their health. So a teacher tried to give the other students an understanding of the subject using age-appropriate materials, something many of the parents were happy about.
They all have their own differences, and they need to be accepted, and their peers need to understand this.
I think it's unacceptable for people to be bullying a child, because they don't like their life choices.
I had a daughter who happened to be in that classroom. This has been an opportunity for her to learn about some topics that I at least would not have had the courage to address with her.
Because that's the key thing being ignored by Cretella and the parents angry about what happened. This transgender child exists. When the parents say the existence of trans people is too controversial for the class, they're saying that that child doesn't have the right to a safe environment to learn in. They are targeting that child. In fact, no amount of semantic tap dancing or platitudes can skirt around. As for the cis girl who may or may not have been upset about all this, that's actually an argument for further education on the topic, not less of it. If the child has it explained to them that their friend didn't turn into a girl, that they were always a girl and had simply been mislabeled as a boy, then they'll likely begin to understand. What I'm saying is, have an actual conversation with the girl. Explain to them that if they feel like they are a girl, there's absolutely nothing that can change that in them. Just like there was nothing that could change this other girl into a boy. Use how worried this girl was that she was a boy to explain how this trans girl has felt all her life. Approaching things in that manner will hopefully make the cis girl feel more secure in her own gender, as well as help her be more understanding of her friend. But let's be honest, that's not the sort of response her mother had. Her mother likely became visibly enraged, the child picked up on that, and that's why they're afraid of the subject. In fact, we might have this entirely backwards, and do note this is purely hypothetical. The child may in fact be trans and had talked to the mother about this possibility before their bath, saw their mother's reaction, and broke down in front of the mirror because now they're torn. They know they've got a bigot for a mother who would be incapable of accepting them for who they are. Either way, the solution to confusion is more education, and parental bigotry does not trump the well-being of a child. So this example does not work how Cretella seems to think it does.
So, transgender ideology, yes, it's child abuse because we are gaslighting our children, number one, and that's all children. And in gaslighting these children, many of them, now that they're thoroughly confused, will think that they really are the opposite sex, and they will be sent down a medical pathway. They will be, as they approach puberty, they'll be put on puberty blockers. And then from puberty blockers, they will be put on cross-sex hormones. That combination will permanently sterilize most, if not all, of those children, and also puts them at risk for heart disease, diabetes, various cancers. Girls now, if they have been on testosterone, which is their sex change hormone, if they've been on testosterone for a full year, by age 16, they can get a double mastectomy. So yes, pubertal castration, okay, so gaslighting, pubertal castration, and surgical mutilation, that's child abuse. It's institutionalized child abuse. To make matters worse, you must realize that prior to transgender ideology, these children were treated either with watchful waiting, because for many kids, it may be a passing phase. For many children, the girls may just be tomboys. So either watchful waiting or family and individual therapy. With those approaches, up to the vast majority, 75% to 95% of kids would accept their biological sex by young adulthood, late adolescence. So yes, this is child abuse.
What Cretella just asserted has no grounding in reality, something we can prove using actual evidence, as I'm about to go on to do. But first of all, let's get one thing absolutely clear. No child is going through medical transition. A child will only be allowed to socially transition, that is, have their name and pronouns respected by those around them. So let's be absolutely clear on that fact. Now, this idea that children are being indoctrinated is nothing new. But how do the statistics weigh in regards to that claim? To find out, we only have to look at the persistence rates at gender identity clinics. Clinics which take the affirmative approach to trans children that Cretella is pretending will lead all children to go on to receive further, this time, medical support. The truth, meanwhile, is that the vast majority, 61% up to 98% of children referred to gender identity clinics, were assessed and received no further support since they were found to not be trans. If there really was some trans ideology indoctrinating people, we'd expect those numbers to be closer to 0%. So why are they sent to these clinics in the first place? Well, it's because the adults in general society don't know what makes a trans person trans. They've been fed false narratives by both anti-trans voices and the media in general of boys in dresses or girls climbing trees, therefore can't differentiate between a child who is trans and a child simply exploring their expression or interests. Professionals, meanwhile, have found key and observable differences between children who are trans and those who are simply exploring who they are. The study also found key differences early on between both persisters and desisters that could be used by professionals to identify who was likely which before this age was ever reached. Which explains why those who continue to visit gender clinics and begin puberty blockers have a 100% persistence rate. Because the system works. Assessment during gender affirmation filters out non-trans children before medical transition even enters the equation. Now, the first form of medicalization they'll be put on are fully reversible puberty blockers. This happens around Tanner stage 2, so after some degree of puberty has already taken place, somewhere around 12 years of age on average. The only time it will start much younger than that is if the child is going through a precocious puberty, also known as early onset puberty, which, by the way, is the condition that puberty blockers were first invented to deal with because precocious puberty carries with it various risks including psychological trauma. When the blockers are removed, puberty sets in dependent on which hormones are dominant. That's whether it be the body's own hormones or synthetic, as with HRT. HRT, hormone replacement therapy, is only started 2 to 4 years after puberty blockers, so around the ages of 14 to 16. By this point, the teenager has been seeing professionals regularly for the past several years and has formed a clear sense of their gender. As for 16-year-olds receiving surgery, that is the age of medical consent in various developed nations. But why do people go through this? I mean, it seems like a lot of hassle. Well, they go through this because for many trans people, it's a medical necessity. It's not a luxury, it's not a whim, it's a series of medical processes that allow some people to live a fulfilling and meaningful life. And it's the consensus of the medical community that this is the best course of action for trans people who suffer gender dysphoria. So again, how is this abuse? By Cretella's vague definition, any form of medically necessary surgery or treatment which carries with it side effects could likewise be classed as abuse. But Cretella doesn't care about that. She doesn't need to be consistent. All she cares about is lying about what gender affirmation entails as a means to attack trans children.
If the parents find a child, that their child is questioning their sex, if things on your own at home are not going well, I encourage all parents to seek out local therapists who will work with them to find underlying either family dynamics or conflicts. If the only therapists you find locally say, oh, you must accept them as transgender, they can reach out to us at bestforchildren.org. That's our website, bestforchildren.org. And we can recommend some therapists who will work with families if they're not in the local area, even by Skype.
If you take Cretella's advice, you will lose your child. If they're not one of the many people who kills themselves over attempts to change their gender, they will likely grow up and sever all contact with you when they leave home. Attempts to convince a trans person to change their gender is akin to torture. It's actual child abuse, a fact agreed upon by every reputable pediatric and psychological institution. A recent Trevor study showed that attempting to convince a child to change their sexuality or gender is bad enough, nearly tripling the number of people who have attempted suicide from 8% to 23%. But actual conversion therapy increases it to as much as 42%. Cretella is quite literally playing with the lives of other people's children, all as part of an effort to reinforce her religious ideology. So hopefully this video and the studies referenced show you just how much of a failed pediatrician Michelle Cretella actually is, and why the purely ideological narrative she is pushing is dangerous. Her position stands in stark opposition to the demonstrable evidence and ethics when it comes to the topic of trans people, especially young trans people. So I'll see you next time to discuss how college students are apparently being forced to adhere to the trans ideology, because I'm sure that will be insightful. As always, please check out our other videos. You can also support Essence of Thought via Patreon, and in doing so help us become ad-free. We'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who's already given to the channel, giving a special thanks to the following people: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, McGay, Steve Corbin, Caitlin Smart, Wellington Marcus, Atlas5, and Sash Daniels. And from myself and Adita, take care now.